communities, and that's something he does really well. And today he's going to come on stage to tell you about his vision on how startups and entrepreneurship is an insurance for our future, and he's going to help us make sure that our future is going to be beautiful. Louis-Felix Binette, join me on stage. He's leading La Main.
Merci Florian, thank you. Bonjour tout le monde. I'll do my talk in English because I prepared it in English before there was this kerfuffle about we need to speak French. But I just want to be very open. I can take questions in French, Spanish, English, Portuguese, German, whatever, okay? So my name is Louis-Felix Binette. I manage a network of business accelerators and incubators all across the province of Quebec, in urban areas, rural areas. But I'm not here to talk about me. I'm here to make a point, which Florian said is that, in my opinion, startups are our best insurance policy for the future. Now, I understand that some of you might not be interested in startups or might not agree with my point. So since we have 20 minutes more or less together, I decided to take the first half of my talk to introduce two metaphors, two lenses through which we can look at the problem. And if you don't care about startups, you'll still learn something from the first 10 minutes of my talk. And if you don't agree with me, then we'll have set a basis on which we can debate and hopefully have a fruitful debate and a fun debate. And so I look forward to questions. All right, so let's start with there's a few metaphors that I've been using over the years to help me make sense of some problems, some dilemmas that I'm facing. And over the years, I've started building sort of a group of them, and I'm going to share two of them with you today. I did not invent them, okay? I'm just sharing them with you. The first one is the image of the cathedral and the bazaar, okay? You can see a cathedral or any sort of big temple, mosque, or whatever, and you can see usually close or around it, the image of a bazaar, a market, or a marché, a souk, a place where people gather informally. So you see how these two things are very different. Actually, that image was suggested by an author, Eric Raymond, who wrote about Linux and the sort of open system of coding, which we heard about in Hillary's talk earlier. So why the image for me is symbolic and important to understand what I'm going to talk about. Usually, if you travel around the world, you go in an old city with a lot of history. At the center, there's a temple, a cathedral, and there's also a space for markets. Usually, the market or the bazaar that was there before the cathedral was built. It has been there a long time. Yet the cathedral has become sort of this monolith, this big thing. And I like this idea because a lot of our society is organized around these two dynamics. The cathedrals are the big institutions, the big companies, the big institutions, companies that we revolve around, that our society's been built around. Yet the bazaar is where a lot of things can happen really fast, where the word of mouth goes around really fast. I'll give you an example. If you walk into a market, a souk, a bazaar, and ask for red shoes, and you go from booth to booth, stall to stall, and you ask for red shoes, and nobody has red shoes to sell you, and a few other people the same day come in and ask for red shoes, maybe within a day or two, at most a week, a number of merchants in the bazaar will have red shoes for sale. It takes just a couple days for the bazaar to address the new demand for red shoes. Obviously, I didn't find any red shoes at the bazaar today, but I'll go tomorrow and maybe I'll find some. In the cathedral, it might take years, decades, if not centuries, for you to be allowed to walk in with red shoes. The rules of the cathedral are very strict. The rules of the bazaar are really, really loose. That image you can take and use and look and project it on a lot of things. If you're in school, you can project it on how the school system works and how things go in the informal channels around the school. If you work in a big company, within a big company that might be in itself a cathedral in the economic space, in the big company you have all of these rules that people say, oh, we've always done this way, and that's why we'll keep doing it this way, and that's the cathedral. Yet around you got people sort of talking together, exchanging, making progress, trying to change things, and eventually maybe even bring some change into the institutional memory or knowledge of the cathedral. So I want you to take this image, the cathedral and the bazaar, put it in the corner of your mind, and I'll give you a second image that we can look at. The second image that I like, again, I did not invent this. I heard it somewhere and I just integrated it into my thinking. The second image that I really, really like is the idea that culture, the culture around us, the codes that we use to speak together, that's our language, that's our art, that's our way of living, that's our habits, all the human culture, we could look at it as the operating system for society. You know what an operating system is? If you use a smartphone, you probably have either the Android operating system or the iOS operating system, which is the code, the basic code that makes your hardware work, that recognizes applications and devices that you plug into your phone, your computer, your smartwatch, your home security system. The OS for society is culture. The culture around the world is made of all sorts of different codes that are more or less compatible, code that evolves over time. People come in and propose to society new ways of thinking, new ways of approaching problems, which are new lines of code in our culture. So if you look at our culture evolving over time, we see this sort of big basket, this big GitHub of code evolving and people proposing branches, sometimes evolving for the better, sometimes evolving for the worse, hopefully just temporarily, and also these like little patches of code from around the planet becoming maybe, I hope, more and more compatible in between themselves and having sort of an operating system that's getting more compatible, more translatable, we can understand each other, we can better share and understand things. So if you look at that code, that operating system for our society as something that evolves as people branch some aspects of the code, I want you to look at this code and to frame innovation within that code. What is innovation if you see our culture, our global culture, human culture around the world as code? Innovation is a proposal. It can be hardware, it can be software, it can be a company, it can be a new form of art that comes into that culture and makes parts of that code that manages our life together on this planet better. It revives an old part of the code that we didn't use. It takes a new part of the code, makes it better. It connects two different things together and solves a problem. And innovation is born from these people coming in and seeing in our culture parts of the OS that are not compatible with new devices and saying, I'm going to make these things happen. I'm going to connect these people together and propose something, and people accept it and integrate into their code, and that's innovation. That's what makes our societies not the monolithic blocks that some people would like to see it. Some people would like to say that our societies, the code was written in 1776 or 18 something, and it should stay that way forever, whereas the reality is that we're always hacking our own cultural OS. So let's look at these two things, these two images that I brought you, and I hope that they're useful for you and they can probably help start some arguments, enrich some arguments that you may have with people. I want you to take these two things, and then I'm going to try to make my point. You can agree or not. You can say, well, I don't really like your image, but you can't really be against it. It's just something. But then I'm going to make a point, and there you can totally disagree with me. My point is that startups and startup entrepreneurs, more than startups, the entrepreneurs that have these ideas of companies are collectively our best insurance policy to make sure that we still have a culture on this planet years from now. Why? Well, let's start this. I told you about the cathedral and the bazaar. We have these big institutions. They are made to stand over like decades and centuries over time. They're usually big institutions, government, big companies with usually 3 letters in their names, maybe 4, or a big family name of someone who lived 200 years ago. These big institutions, they can survive little storms. A storm that will flood the bazaar, that will flood the market, that will flood the streets. These institutions can weather a lot of storms. But if a big change was to come, earthquake, major flood, climate change, were to come, there's a big chance that some of these cathedrals may be a little more fragile. You can start seeing cracks in the roofs, and then the light shines in. That's how change happens. Leonard Cohen, our Montreal poet, once sang. So you might see these cathedrals starting to crack at the edges and maybe even falter, fall down. When these cathedrals fall down, it takes years to rebuild. But the next day, there's still people at the bazaar around there. So our startup entrepreneurs, maybe they went to work within a big cathedral. They saw problems in there that say, oh, some of those problems might be universal. Some of those problems might be lived in other big companies. I think I can solve that problem for this cathedral that I'm working in, but they won't let me. So the entrepreneur goes outside the cathedral, into the bazaar, finds other people with whom to exchange, crack that problem, creates a solution, and then goes knock on the door of every cathedral around the world to sell that little solution, that little product, that little service that solves one critical problem. That innovation oftentimes is killed when it's born within the cathedral, but it grows, it is nurtured in the bazaar, in the constant contact of entrepreneurs and tech and geeks trying to solve the issues and the problem. And that creates the innovation. So these entrepreneurs, if there's a big catastrophe, they will have tried to solve all of these little problems that they see, always coming up with new ways. And of course, most of them will fail at what they try to change. A startup is a company that is designed to fail. Why? Not because it's bad, because they're trying something difficult. They're trying a problem that has been paved over and ignored for hundreds of years. They're trying to solve big things, and they will probably fail. But every time they fail, they get better at trying to solve big things. So we had a terrible last year and a half with the pandemic, and all of the other things that the planet saw in terms of natural catastrophes. And these are all problems. And we're saying, oh, good God, thank you for the pandemic to be almost over. We can almost meet again almost regularly. But I say, well, it was just one of a wave of maybe a tsunami of things as we continue to meddle with our planet and things. New problems will arise. And guess what? Most probably, cathedrals will falter. Most probably, the bazaar will always be there to come up with new ideas, to find that mythical red shoe that we need to actually go forward in our way of life. And so startup entrepreneurs, they try big things. Oftentimes, they get that idea to try because they face a problem. They face a problem in their job. They face a problem in their community. They see a problem on television, on the internet. They see things happening and they think, well, maybe I have an idea. Maybe I can propose something that would help solve this. And as we nurture this reflex of thinking, maybe I can solve that problem, not just for my family or for my neighbors or for my town. Maybe I can solve it for every town that lives beside rising water. or every town that is stuck in an environment that is being degraded year after year. These entrepreneurs, this reflex of thinking big, is something we need to nurture. That means we actually need to be okay with failure. We need to be okay with helping entrepreneurs starting things that will probably fail, but overall, if 1,000 entrepreneurs start something new, something will come of it. And I know startups have a bad press these days. We hear a lot of things. There's one startup that we're all connected with on our cell phones that I had a hard couple weeks. There's others that are in trial. But I want to tell you, for every startup that gets bad press in the media, there is 1 million startups that are trying amazing things to make sure that we're more resilient towards the next pandemic, that our cities can more rapidly adapt to climate change. There's 1 million startups trying all sorts of new things, not just technological. They're sometimes just innovating in our cultural code, the way we interact. And I want you to believe, and we can debate this, I want you to believe that if we manage to convince and support and nurture the taste for taking huge risking failure in a proportion of our people, saying, you know what, maybe you're not happy trying to work 9 to 5 in your cathedral. Come in the bazaar and invent things with us. If you fail, we'll help you. Because on your second try and your third try, you're going to be better. If we nurture this as societies around the world, we nurture a part of our population to actually be hackers of our cultural code, to actually look at the cathedrals and say, how can I play between the cracks that I see? How can I change something? I can tell you, if we do this, we will have entrepreneurs who will feed off the problems that our societies face. They will come up with our full support with new ideas, new business ideas, and it'll push this. And we don't know yet what will be a successful startup tomorrow. But if we have this growing pool of people who keep trying, and we support them in trying, we will eventually find the right solution to the problems that we're facing. And again, I'm not a techno-evangelist. I don't think that it's all technological. There's a lot of social innovation that needs to be done. But on the whole, having thousands of entrepreneurs in every big cities, in rural areas, trying to crack problems, getting the resources, getting the support, getting the moral support of all of us to say, it's totally crazy. You could have a big paying job in a big 3-letter company. You're leaving that to actually start something with no money, and you're going to try for 2-3 years and maybe you're going to fail. If we support them and say, it's okay. If you need anything, call me, I'll help you. If you need a place to crash for a couple of weeks because you couldn't pay your rent, I'll host you at home. If you need a little love money, we give you all a bit of money so you can get your product, your proof of concept together and go sell it to investors. We'll help you. If we did this, I would be a lot less scared of what the future holds for us, for me, for my kids, for your kids, for all of us. And I'd be a lot more comfortable getting on stage here and telling you that the future is bright. So I want to thank you very much for your time. And again, you might agree or not with me. You might not really care about startups, and that's okay. If we all quit our job and started launching risky companies, the world wouldn't be a better place. But we need some of these entrepreneurs. So I hope this talk was useful. Reminder, the Cathedral and the Bazaar, a great framework to look at how the institutions are working and where is the place, the bazaar, where we can actually have creative ideas, and the culture as code. Remember, everything we do every day, if we challenge the codes, if we push the boundaries, we don't have to start companies here. If we just push the boundaries of the codes, like if we question, why are we doing this way? Why are we still doing this the way our grandparents or great-grandparents did it? And is it still relevant in today's world? If we keep questioning this, then we'll have a more robust, more resilient cultural code, most resilient operating system for our society. Again, thank you very much, and it's a pleasure. I'll talk to you. I'll take questions through Florian. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Louis-Felix. Take a seat, get a drink, whichever you want. It doesn't matter. Thank you so much for being with us today. I know you're doing a lot every day, and you're always moving around to try to get people to start their companies and not be afraid to start their companies, because we know it's a huge thing to overcome. I'd like to go back in the past a little bit with you, because you started with some pretty weird concepts in Montreal and in that startup and entrepreneurship world, with the fucked up nights and the creative mornings. Can you tell us a little bit of how these projects started happening, and what was the inspiration for that?
Yeah, I'll give you a bit of context. So before resettling in Montreal about 10 years ago, I was out of Montreal for 15 years, and I worked as a diplomat. So I was a Canadian diplomat. I represented Canada abroad in the United Nations. I traveled around the world. I was posted in New York for a few years. I saw the financial crisis and the big recession in the U.S. that followed that. The first election of Barack Obama, I was there to cover sort of politics and economics in the U.S. When I came back to Montreal, I realized it was a very happening, very, bustling city. There's so many things happening, so many people trying new things. People were squatting at Notman House and, starting companies and thinking, hey, maybe we can have startups here too. And what I felt is a need to connect people meaningfully around creativity and things like that. And Creative Mornings, which was started in New York City about 15 years ago, was for me a great way to create a strong local creative community, but connect it with similar communities around the world in 200 cities around the world, and be able to share on the topics that we see and connect sort of that operating system that we have. And then Nathalie Rivière, who met people who founded Fuck Up Nights in Mexico. So she met them in Mexico, and they're entrepreneurs who were, sorry for a word, but fucking up. They went and grabbed beers together and talked about their failures and say, it's okay, guys, we're going to help each other. Nathalie met them, and she said, this is such a powerful concept. I want to bring the idea of Fuck Up Nights to Montreal. Can you help me? You've been successful with Creative Mornings. And we started that 5 years ago now, today, more or less. And we've had 30 events, about 100 entrepreneurs coming and sharing very, very deep, personal, scarring stories of failure. And they all told us, I feel stronger for it. The fact that you gave me a crowd, you gave me a safe space where I can come and talk about my failures and share it with others, I'm less scared of trying again. And I'm feeling better about my failure because it's okay. We all do have failures.
I think that's a really important thing to learn, not just for startups, not just for entrepreneurs, for us as human beings. Because I feel that most of us, when we start out in life, when we get out of our studies, and I think there's something maybe in our school system,
yeah.
And we get so scared of failure. And I know that, for example, for a lot of students in Quebec and everywhere in the world, there's a lot of performance anxiety rising.
Yeah.
And what would be your best advice for these students who are struggling maybe with this kind of anxiety to get beyond that and to heal and to learn to accept failure?
I know it's really hard. I'm raising children at home now, and I see this. We want our children to be so good, and the institutions want to succeed, and they value performance, and that you get grades and get prize for. But honestly, what we need when we face this world, and the world changes a bit, and you're oh, you adapt and you get better. But when the world changes a lot, the cathedrals fall, what do we have in the end? what is our big prize or big like A plus worth if we're all, serving an institution to say, oh, recognize that I'm good. We get nothing. When the cathedral falls, all we're left with is who we are, right? And if we never valued who we are, how we were as an ADD kid or a very creative kid, like, let's all try to be ourselves. Let's try to become better versions of ourselves. And when I chose to leave the foreign service, the diplomacy, and become an entrepreneur, people asked me, why you want to do this? And people thought I was saying, because I want to make a lot of money. I didn't want to make a lot of money. I said, if I remain a diplomat, I can only become the best diplomat that Louis-Felix Binette can be, which is probably not a very good diplomat, because I'm not diplomatic. Well, sometimes I am, but I mean, but if I become an entrepreneur, I want on that entrepreneurship journey to become the best Louis-Felix Binette that I can be. And that is very, very key difference.
Yeah.
Sometimes we want to be the best thing that other people want us to be, but we cannot forget that we can only be our best selves. And when, can I say that, shit hits the fan, we will need to be the better versions of ourselves. And we need to find ways within our institutions, but I hope that the bazaar, the startup world, the creative world, the adventures of entering tech programming competitions are opportunities not just to show the world that we can be good at something, but to prove ourselves that we can be good at something, so that when push comes to shove, we have the skills, we have the mindset to actually, in the Mad Max world, it's not the technology of yesterday that works. It's our ability to actually, go with the flow and invent new things, and that starts right here.
That's a powerful message. We have a question from the audience, from Valentin. He's asking, how can we avoid the exode of tech talents and startups from countries, regions to our big cities, and maybe even promote the other way around?
Yeah, that's a big issue that we're trying to tackle. There's this idea, and it's based on reality, that it's easier to start up. It's easier to succeed as a startup in the big city, because big cities, or urban centers like Montreal, they're accelerators in the way they're made. They're accelerators of human connection. You go to a cafe, you walk down a street in a popular neighborhood, and you meet people who you have a very weak connection with. And you're like, oh, maybe we could have a project together. We could start a band, or we could start a company, or we can have an art project. And it's easy to do in the city, because there's a concentration of all sorts of different competences. It's harder to do in more rural areas, because they have like these institutions they've been doing ways for and they don't for a lot of time, and they don't really have the same density of and diversity. But I think we can work, and it's part of our work. We can work on trying to build the right connections. And I mean, the pandemic showed us that we can do a lot of work remote, right? And we create the right amount of connections that we can reproduce the sort of serendipity that you get in the city, but reproduce it through networks with people who want to start up a company, I don't know, in a remote region, in Abitibi or in Île-de-la-Madeleine, and create the right amount of connections, the right opportunities to meet, exchange, and I'm saying between regions in Quebec, but also all around the world, with other people who share this same problem. And I think we cannot undervalue that a lot of the problems that will live because of climate change will be perceptible outside the big cities. Right here in downtown Montreal, we're insulated from a lot of the problems that climate change is bringing onto this world. So it's really hard for us, from our little comfortable downtown Montreal location office, to say, oh, we should really do something about this. It's much more evident when you're by the side of the water that used to be 100 meters away and now it's half in your basement, or when you see tall swaths of grass burning just because of heat waves and stuff. So I think a lot of the problems will be perceptible from outside big cities, and we need to take whatever it is that makes us capable of sustaining startups in big cities. We need to take these resources and push it towards the entrepreneurs. And so the exodus needs to be the other way around. It should be on the entrepreneur. Oh, I want to succeed as a startup. I need to move to Montreal or New York City or Boston. No. The resources here in Boston, investors, coaches, startup entrepreneurship centers, we need to be out there and meet the startups, entrepreneurs where they live and provide them with the service that they have, because they're probably going to be much more successful if they can build their companies from their towns and create value for that town. And I always say, all we need is one crazy entrepreneur to start a crazy project in town to succeed. And within a year, 5 years, a decade, there'll be a dozen startup entrepreneurs in all those towns. So there's a lot more potential there.
So what you're saying is we just have to share knowledge.
Yes, share, propagate knowledge, move around, get off of your comfy downtown seat and get out there and meet the real people who face real problems in the real world.
What a perfect way to conclude this session, right?
Yes.
Thank you so much for being here, Louis-Felix. I'm going to invite you to leave the stage.
Thank you.
And, well, thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, everyone.
Big applause for Louis-Felix.